The first voice you hear every morning isn't from the outside world, it's your own. Before the phone rings, before anyone texts you, before the world has a chance to place demands on you, your own thoughts greet you first. That voice, that subtle inner whisper, is the foundation of how your entire day unfolds, and most people never stop to examine what that voice sounds like. The truth is, self-talk is not some motivational gimmick. It is the script that runs your life. It is the lens through which you interpret reality, and whether you realize it or not, you're always speaking to yourself. In silence, in passing thoughts, in the words you don't say out loud, but feel in your bones. The dialogue either strengthens you or slowly destroys you. If you speak to yourself like a critic, you walk through life like a failure, even when you're doing everything right. If you speak to yourself like a victim, you interpret every delay as personal punishment. But if you speak to yourself like a leader, everything changes, not just your mood. Your identity begins to shift. And when your identity shifts, your world follows. A leader doesn't speak in panic. A leader doesn't speak with doubt. A leader speaks with clarity, with control, with grounded truth. Even in the middle of chaos. That's how you have to begin speaking to yourself, not when life is perfect, but especially when it's not, because that's when self-talk matters most. When you fail, when you're uncertain, when you're tempted to give up, that's when your self-talk writes your future. You can either become your own coach or your worst enemy, and the difference is everything. This isn't about lying to yourself. This isn't about fake positivity. It's about choosing the language of responsibility, choosing to narrate your life through a lens that builds strength instead of shame. Self-talk isn't about pretending you're okay. It's about reminding yourself of who you are, even when everything in your life says otherwise. Some people talk to themselves like prisoners, like they've already lost, like they have no control. They say things like, "I'm not good at this. I always mess things up. Nothing ever works out for me." And they say it with such consistency that eventually it becomes truth, not because it is, but because repetition builds belief. The way you talk to yourself when no one is around determines what kind of battles you can survive, and most importantly, it determines how you carry yourself when the world tries to define you. Your mind is always listening. Not just to what others say about you, but to what you say about you. Every time you speak in weakness, your brain adjusts. It takes that input and recalibrates how much energy you'll have to try again. It adjusts how much courage you'll bring into the next day. The voice inside your head doesn't just describe your life, it creates it. When you begin shifting that voice, even subtly, the shift compounds. You begin to feel a new kind of stability. You stop relying on external motivation. You stop needing others to lift you. You carry your own strength. Quietly, deeply, like a leader does. Because real leadership doesn't start on stages or in meetings. It starts in mirrors, in silence. In the moment you look at yourself and decide, "I will not speak like a victim today. I will not narrate this life from fear. I will speak to myself as someone who is capable, resilient, worthy, and built for growth." That inner voice becomes your anchor when everything else feels shaky. The world may label you many things. They may call you too slow, too young, too old, too late. But none of that matters if the voice in your head is saying, "Keep going. We're not done yet. We've been here before, and we came out stronger." Your internal dialogue must become your private sanctuary, a place where you rebuild when the world tears you down, a place where your dreams feel safe, not mocked, a place where you correct yourself, not curse yourself, a place where you train your mind like a soldier trains for war, not for external fights, but for the inner ones. Because the biggest battles you'll ever fight are never with other people. They're with the part of you that wants to quit, the part of you that wants to stay small, the part that plays old stories on repeat, stories that no longer serve you. But you're not here to repeat the past. You're here to rewrite it, and the first sentence of that rewrite begins in your own voice. Speak like someone who knows what they're building. Speak like someone who refuses to betray themselves. Speak like someone who understands the world may not give you what you want, but you can still give yourself permission to rise anyway. Speak like a leader. And yes, there will be days when your mind will wander back to old scripts. Days when the doubt creeps in louder than usual. That's okay, but those are the exact days when you hold your ground, when you pause, when you close your eyes and reset the script. You remind yourself, I am not my worst moment. I am not the failure I've been afraid of. I am not here to stay small. Because once you shift your inner voice, you'll notice everything else begin to follow. You'll walk differently, decide differently, carry yourself like someone who knows they belong in the room, even if nobody claps when you arrive. This is the foundation of powerful self-leadership. It's not about controlling outcomes, it's about controlling what you say to yourself about those outcomes, because that's the difference between people who break and people who bend, between those who shrink and those who stretch. You may not be able to control what happens to you, but you can control how you narrate it. You can choose not to speak defeat into your own soul. You can choose to coach yourself forward instead of criticizing yourself backward. That's the power. That's the shift. That's where your leadership begins. Not in your title, not in your achievements, but in your private, daily, internal conversation. So starting today, you speak different. You speak with compassion, but with strength. You speak with truth, but without shame. You speak with clarity, not chaos. You speak to yourself like someone who matters, because you do. And when you finally make that your habit, when your self-talk becomes your superpower, nothing outside of you can break what you've built inside of you. Chapter 2. You are not your thoughts. You are the voice that answers them. Thoughts are not commands, they're not facts. They're not permanent. They're just patterns, echoes of what you've heard, what you've feared, what you've believed, or what you've absorbed along the way. But here's the thing most people never realize. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who responds to them. Every single day, thousands of thoughts run through your mind. Some are random, some are useful, some are dark, some are empowering. But most of them are recycled from yesterday, and the day before, and the week before that. Left unchecked, those thoughts become the background noise of your life. But when you pause, when you step back, you begin to realize there's a difference between what you think and who you are. The human mind is a constant machine. It will generate thoughts about anything and everything. You'll think things you never meant to think. You'll hear doubt in your own voice. You'll question your worth. You'll replay old mistakes. You'll fear things that haven't even happened. That's normal. That's the machine running its script. But here's where the shift happens. When you start talking back, when you stop letting every thought be the final word, when you say, that's not truth, that's just fear. When you say, this thought doesn't serve me today, when you say, that may have been me in the past, but I'm not carrying it forward, that's the power of self-leadership. Not to erase every negative thought, but to interrupt it, to challenge it, to choose what stays and what goes, to remember that you are not a slave to your mind, you are its commander. The strongest people aren't the ones who never think negatively, they're the ones who notice it, confront it, and refuse to believe it without a fight. They've trained their minds to question the doubt, to silence the inner critic, to break the cycle. And in doing so, they begin to write a new story, one choice at a time. There will be days when your mind turns against you, days when it whispers things you don't want to hear, days when it feels like the storm is coming from inside, not outside. But that's when your training kicks in. That's when you take a breath and respond, not from fear, but from awareness. I'm having a thought, and I don't have to believe it. That sentence alone can change everything. Because it creates space. And in that space, you take back control. You are not the fear that visits you. You are not the past that haunts you. You are not the shame that speaks your name. You are the presence that decides what stays. And with that power, you begin to rebuild your identity from the inside out. Your mind may say you're not good enough. But you say, I'm learning. And that's enough for now. Your mind may say you'll never change. But you say, watch me. Your mind may say no one believes in you. But you say, I'm done needing permission. This is where true self-talk begins, not with positivity, but with awareness, with stepping outside the thought stream and choosing which voice you want to follow. You don't need to cancel every negative thought, you just need to stop giving them authority. You need to see them for what they are, passing, temporary, repetitive, but not final. Imagine your mind like a courtroom. Every thought is just a witness. Some tell the truth. Some lie. Some exaggerate. Some project fear. But you are the judge. You get to decide what's admissible, what's relevant, what deserves to stay, and what needs to be dismissed. Most people never step into that seat. They let the witnesses run the trial. They let fear testify without evidence. They let shame deliver a sentence without defense. But not you. Not anymore. From now on, your inner courtroom is led by consciousness, by awareness, by leadership, and that means some thoughts won't make it past the front door. There is a quiet kind of power in knowing. This thought came from pain, not truth. Or, this voice isn't mine, it's something I picked up years ago and forgot to let go. You get to rewrite the narrative. You get to decide what voice becomes the loudest. And over time, the voice you train becomes the voice you trust. The greatest athletes in the world don't win because their mind never doubts. They win because their response to doubt is stronger than the doubt itself. They've trained their inner voice like a weapon, disciplined, focused, unshakable. And you can do the same. You don't need a perfect mind, you just need a powerful response. So when the mind says, you're not ready, you say, that may be true, but I'm still going. When the mind says, you've failed too many times, you say, and yet, I'm still standing. When the mind says they're better than you say, I'm not competing, I'm growing. You begin to speak truth louder than fear. You begin to speak presence louder than the past, and with that, your entire world begins to shift. Because once you learn to speak to yourself like a leader, no external voice holds more weight than your internal one. Criticism bounces off you, doubt loses its grip. Disappointment becomes fuel, not failure, because you've trained the only voice that truly decides how far you go, your own. You are not your thoughts. You are the voice that answers them. And now you're learning to answer with strength, with intention, with power. One sentence at a time. Chapter 3. Speak life into your struggles, not death. Everyone struggles. It doesn't matter how confident they look, how successful they appear, or how many smiles they wear. Everyone has chapters they don't talk about. Everyone has moments when their strength feels small and their faith runs thin. But what separates those who rise from those who remain buried is not the size of the struggle, it's the story they speak into it. You can speak life into your struggle, or you can speak death. You can call yourself broken, or you can call yourself rebuilding. You can say, I'm stuck, or you can say, I'm still standing. The words you attach to your pain will either trap you inside it or lead you through it. Most people don't even notice how quickly they curse their own journey. In the middle of the storm, they say things like, this is just who I am, nothing ever changes, or maybe I'm not built for more. And those words, spoken repeatedly in frustration or fear, become mental shackles, invisible, but powerful. The more you speak them, the heavier they become, until you're no longer fighting the struggle, you're fighting the narrative you built around it. Struggle is not your enemy. Your words can be. Pain comes. Loss happens. Confusion arrives, but how you talk about it, how you frame it inside your own mind, shapes whether that struggle becomes your prison or your platform. You don't have to be fake. You don't have to pretend everything's okay. But you must be intentional. You must be wise with the words you allow to take root when life hurts, because in those moments your mind is soft. Your identity is open, and if you let negative self-talk pour into the wound, it hardens into something dangerous: identity. Struggle should never become identity. It's a season, not a sentence, a chapter, not the whole story. But when you speak death into it, when you constantly declare yourself as defeated, broken, or unworthy, you start believing that's all you'll ever be, and that belief writes the rest of your future. But when you begin to speak life into your pain, everything changes. You start to say, "This is hard, but I'm not hopeless." You start to say, "I'm hurting, but I'm healing." You start to say, "I've fallen, but I'm rising." These aren't just phrases, they're weapons, they're anchors, they're seeds. Spoken over and over, they begin to shape a new kind of mental environment, one where growth is possible, even in the dark. Because what you say to yourself in the dark determines what you'll be ready to walk into when the light returns. It's not about lying to yourself, it's about refusing to let the struggle steal your voice. When your world is shaking, your words must become the steady ground. When the noise outside is too loud, your inner language becomes your only shelter. If that language is built on defeat, you crumble. But if it's built on truth and strength, even if whispered, you stand taller than your pain. Every person who has come back from rock bottom did so by changing their inner dialogue. They started catching the words that dragged them down. They stopped repeating old scripts of failure and started rewriting new ones of faith, resilience, and power. They didn't wait for the pain to end to speak better. They spoke better to survive it. And so can you. You can begin today, right now, with one sentence. I am not what I'm going through. I'm who I choose to become on the other side of it. That sentence becomes a compass, a breath of life in the middle of chaos. You might be tired. You might be scared. But you're still choosing to speak in a way that pulls you forward. And that choice, repeated again and again, becomes momentum. There's a weight to your words. Every "I can't" adds bricks to your shoulders. Every "I never get it right" makes the climb steeper. But every "I'm learning," every "I'll figure it out," every "this won't break me" lightens the load. Not because it changes reality overnight, but because it changes you. And when you change, everything you touch begins to change. There is no greater act of self-leadership than choosing to speak life when life feels like death. Not because it's easy, not because it's pretty, but because you refuse to let the struggle define your spirit. There will be moments when your self-talk is the only thing you have, when no one is calling, when nothing is working, when the mirror reflects a version of you that feels unfamiliar. In those moments, the easiest thing to do is speak what you see, but the most powerful thing you can do is speak what you believe. You say, "This version of me is temporary." You say, "I am walking through fire, but I'm not fire. I'm gold being refined." You say, "I haven't lost myself. I'm shedding what no longer serves me." That's how leaders think, not perfect, but powerful in their words, intentional in their self-definition. Clear about the fact that language isn't just communication, it's creation. The words you speak shape the life you live. So speak life, even into the hardest places. Speak life over your fear. Speak life into your financial struggle. Speak life over your failed relationship. Speak life into your anxiety. Speak life into your identity. Because every time you do, you reclaim authority over your journey. You step back into the driver's seat. You stop being a victim of circumstance and start becoming the narrator of your story. And when your story is told years from now, it won't be about the pain you faced. It'll be about the voice you chose. The voice that said, "I'm not done." The voice that said, "This is not the end." The voice that said, I am becoming someone I've never been. And that voice, that internal leader, will be the reason you made it through. Chapter 4. Don't repeat the pain. Rewrite the script. There's a moment in every person's life when the pain becomes familiar, not because it's comfortable, but because it's repeated. A pattern, a cycle, a loop that plays on its own. The same fear, the same reaction, the same story, over and over again. You don't want it, but you've learned how to live with it. You've made room for it. And slowly, without realizing it, you start believing it's just who you are. But it's not who you are. It's a script, a mental story that got written during pain, during trauma, during survival. Now it's playing on autopilot. That script tells you what you're worth. It tells you how far you can go. It decides how you respond to opportunity. It decides how you recover from setbacks. It becomes the voice that whispers when no one else is around. But here's the truth. Just because the pain was real doesn't mean the script is permanent. You don't have to keep repeating what hurt you. You don't have to let the past direct your present. You can interrupt the loop. You can grab the pen, and you can write a different ending. Most people live in stories that were written by fear. I'm not good enough. I always ruin everything. Nobody ever stays. These are not just passing thoughts. These are scripts, and scripts become identity. And identity, once set, drives everything. Your relationships, your ambition, your self-worth, your ability to bounce back, your boundaries. It's all filtered through what you've told yourself again and again, especially in your worst moments. The brain craves patterns, even if those patterns are painful. That's why so many people keep reliving the same heartbreak, the same rejection, the same failure, because they haven't rewritten the script. They've just changed the people and the places. But the story? It stays the same. So how do you break it? You start by noticing it. With brutal honesty, you stop blaming the world, and you start tracing the thread of your beliefs. You catch the moment when your mind says, "See, it's happening again," and instead of nodding, you interrupt it. You say, "No, it's just a familiar moment, not a final one." And then you speak. Not the same lines you've said 1,000 times, not the old rehearsed story of failure, but something new, something stronger, something uncomfortable at first, because it's unfamiliar, but necessary, because it's true. You say, "I'm allowed to grow beyond who I used to be." You say, "This pain taught me, but it doesn't own me." You say, "I don't owe my past a lifetime subscription." And with that, the pattern begins to crack. Because a script can only run as long as you keep repeating it. But the moment you speak a new line, the moment you choose to believe something different, you shift the outcome. Maybe you were abandoned. Maybe you were told you'd never succeed. Maybe you failed in a big way. That pain wrote a story in you. It tried to convince you that you're always one mistake away from falling apart. But that's not the truth. That's just a bad script. And you can edit it. You can rip out the pages. You can start fresh. Rewriting the script doesn't mean erasing your past. It means reinterpreting it. With compassion. With strength. With clarity. You don't lie to yourself. You look your past in the eye and say, "That happened, but it doesn't define me." That's how leaders rise. Not by denying what hurt them, but by refusing to let it become who they are forever. And once you begin to change your inner script, everything else starts aligning. Your self-talk becomes cleaner. Your decisions get bolder. Your patterns shift. You start catching yourself before the spiral. You start speaking life where you used to speak regret. Because now you've trained yourself to pause and ask, whose voice is this? Mine or someone else's I internalized years ago? That pause alone is power. It creates space between thought and belief. And in that space, you choose differently. You start speaking from who you want to be, not who the pain told you to be. And the more you do that, the more the old narrative loses its grip. You begin waking up differently, thinking differently, walking into rooms with a deeper sense of worth. Not because everything's perfect, but because the voice inside is no longer poisoned. It's rooted, clear, grounded in truth. You begin to understand that rewriting the script doesn't mean you never struggle again. It means you don't collapse under the weight of old beliefs. You no longer say, "I'm broken." You say, "I'm rebuilding." You no longer say, "This always happens to me." You say, "This is new. I'm writing a better outcome." You no longer say, "I can't trust anyone." You say, "I'm learning how to trust myself again." That shift in language, that shift in identity, changes your entire life. Quietly, subtly, but permanently. Because your future isn't just waiting to be found, it's waiting to be written. And the pen has always been in your hand. Chapter 5. Lead yourself first, even when you feel lost. Leadership doesn't begin when others follow you. It begins when you choose to follow yourself. When you take one step forward, even if you're not sure where it leads. It begins not in clarity, but in confusion. Not in strength, but in struggle. Because the truth is, you don't need to have it all figured out to start leading your life. You just need to make a decision. I will not stay stuck. There are seasons when life feels like fog. Nothing looks familiar. The path ahead is blurry. The map you used to rely on no longer works. You look around and there's no one giving you direction, no one clapping, no one validating your steps, just silence. And in that silence, something powerful can happen, if you let it. Because being lost doesn't mean you've failed. It means you've outgrown the old route. And now you must build the next one from within. The dangerous part isn't feeling lost. The dangerous part is believing that you must wait for clarity before you move. But real leaders don't wait for perfect. They begin where they are, with what they know, with what they feel, and with what they believe deep down still matters. Even if it's messy, even if it's slow, even if it's quiet. That's what leading yourself looks like. Not pretending to be okay, but choosing not to collapse. Not knowing the destination, but still choosing to rise in the morning and take a single step forward. Not waiting for answers, but choosing to ask better questions internally. What matters right now? What is one thing I can do today that honors my future self? When everything outside of you feels uncertain, the only leadership that matters is the one you offer to yourself, and that leadership begins with language. You don't say, "I'm lost." You say, "I'm learning to find new ground." You don't say, "I have no direction." You say, "I'm building one from the inside." You don't say, "I don't know who I am anymore." You say, "I'm getting to know myself on a deeper level." These aren't just words. These are lifelines. These are reminders that you don't have to know every step. You just have to trust that you are worth guiding, even when you feel unsure, even when your energy is low, even when your confidence is shaky. The hardest time to lead yourself is when you feel like you're not qualified. But that's exactly when leadership is born. Because when there's no crowd, no affirmation, no structure, that's when your voice matters most. The voice inside that says, "This won't be where I end." You don't need anyone's permission to grow. You don't need applause to evolve. You don't need clarity to begin. You just need a decision, a line in the sand that says, "From this moment on, I will not abandon myself." And maybe you still feel heavy. Maybe the confusion is still there. That's okay. Leadership isn't about eliminating emotion. It's about moving anyway. It's about being the calm within your own storm. Even if your steps are slow, even if you wobble, you still move like someone who refuses to stay stuck. There will be moments when you'll want someone to rescue you, someone to speak truth over you, someone to say, "I see you, and you're doing better than you think." But what if that someone is you? What if you're the leader you've been waiting for? What if you could look in the mirror, not for motivation, but for partnership, and say, I've got you. We're not quitting. We're going to figure this out. That's the moment you stop waiting for the world to validate your next step, and you take it anyway. One act of self-leadership can change your entire momentum. One day of structure. One moment of focus. One morning of getting back up without needing a reason. Because what you're doing isn't dramatic, it's foundational. It's the quiet work that no one sees. It's the internal shift that happens when you realize, I've been letting life lead me, but now I lead me. And yes, you'll make mistakes, you'll guess wrong sometimes. You'll have days when it feels like you're going in circles, but leadership is not about perfection, it's about direction. And if your direction is forward, even just slightly, then you're already doing better than you think. So when you feel lost, don't freeze. Don't curse the fog. Don't give up on your journey. Stand still if you must, but do so with presence. Then take the next right step, and the next one, and the next. That's how new paths are built, not by maps someone else handed you, but by footsteps you laid with your own resilience, by words you spoke to yourself when no one was listening, by choices you made without certainty, but with courage. Lead yourself first, and you'll find that even in the wilderness of uncertainty, a road begins to appear, one that's yours, one that was always waiting for you. Chapter 6. You become what you keep repeating. Your life doesn't change through one big decision. It changes through the small ones you keep making again and again, not once, not twice, but daily, repeated, over and over, until the repetition becomes identity, until it becomes normal, until it becomes you. You don't become what you want. You don't become what you intend. You become what you repeat. This is the hidden truth behind every person who has risen and every person who has remained stuck. It's not about desire. Everyone wants better. Everyone wants more. But only a few understand that the secret is in the repetition, in the patterns that no one sees, in the behaviors that look small but stack like bricks in silence. Whatever you keep saying to yourself, that becomes your reality. If every day you wake up and repeat to yourself, I'm not disciplined, I'm not good enough, I can't focus, that's what your nervous system starts expecting. Your mind stops challenging it. Your body adjusts to match it, and your actions begin aligning with it. Without even realizing it, you think you're living your life, but really, you're just living your habits, your mental habits, your emotional habits, your verbal habits. They're like scripts running in the background of your mind, and the more often you run them, the more deeply they become part of you, until eventually they feel like truth. But they're not truth, they're just practice. And anything practiced long enough feels real, even if it's false. You can practice shame. You can practice fear. You can practice doubt. And if you keep practicing it, you become it. But here's the power. You can also practice strength. You can practice discipline. You can practice clarity. You can practice peace. You can practice self-respect. And if you do that long enough, you become that too. It doesn't happen in a single day. But the same way the negative became familiar through repetition, the positive will too. It's not about perfection. It's about direction. The goal isn't to never fall into old patterns again. The goal is to notice them sooner and choose something different, again and again, until that new choice becomes automatic. And it starts small. One word, one phrase, one quiet commitment. This time, I won't speak to myself that way. This time, I'll finish what I start. This time, I'll choose peace over panic. And then you do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. And over time, the repetition begins to rewire your self-image. You stop identifying with the old version of yourself. You stop speaking from your past. You stop reacting from fear. And you start responding from power. That's how transformation happens. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, repetitively, intentionally. You build who you are through what you choose to repeat. If you want to be confident, you must repeat confidence before it feels real. If you want to be focused, you must show up to the work repeatedly before the focus comes naturally. If you want peace, you must practice the habits of peace. Stillness, boundaries, clarity, not once, but again and again. You become what you rehearse, and most people are rehearsing the very things they want to leave behind. They keep saying, I can't break this cycle, and so the cycle continues. They keep saying, this is just who I am, and so the identity remains. But if you can become trapped through repetition, you can also become free through repetition. The mind is plastic, the brain is changeable. Science has already proven it. What you focus on, what you think, what you speak, what you reinforce, literally reshapes the way your brain fires. But most people never use that power with intention. They're repeating things out of habit, not out of awareness. They're speaking weakness out of comfort, not out of truth. They're reinforcing stories that don't serve them simply because they've never questioned the pattern. But not you. Not anymore. From this moment, you pay attention to what you keep saying, to what you keep doing, to what you keep allowing. And you ask yourself, is this the version of me I want to grow? If the answer is no, you interrupt it. Even if it feels true, even if it feels familiar, even if it feels natural, you stop feeding the repetition that no longer reflects who you want to be. Because every time you repeat something, you're feeding it. And what you feed grows. So feed power, feed courage, feed consistency, and feed self-belief until it becomes your default setting. You don't have to fake it. You don't have to force it. You just have to keep choosing it. Even on the days it feels small. Even on the days you mess up. Even on the days it doesn't seem to matter. Because it does. Repetition is not loud. It's not exciting. But it's permanent. It's how you install new programming into your mind. It's how you replace shame with resilience. It's how you rewrite years of fear with a future of strength. And here's what's most important. You don't need to feel like the best version of yourself to practice becoming it. You just need to start showing up for the repetition. And the repetition will shape you. It always does. Chapter 7. Your words are mirrors. Make them reflect who you want to be. The words you speak, whether to others or to yourself, are not just sounds. They are mirrors. They reflect how you see yourself. They reveal the version of you that you believe in. And over time, those words become more than reflections. They become reality. Every time you say something about yourself, you're not just describing who you are. You're reinforcing it. You're either confirming an identity that limits you, or you're expanding into one that lifts you. If you constantly say, I'm just not good at this, the mirror reflects limitation. If you say, I always mess things up, the mirror reflects failure. If you say, I'm not confident, the mirror reflects insecurity. And the more you look into that mirror, the more you start to believe that this is all you can be. But the truth is, you're not looking at truth. You're looking at a mirror shaped by repetition. And if you want to change what you see, you must change what you say. That's the power of self-talk. You can't become someone you keep speaking against. You can't grow into greatness while calling yourself broken. You can't lead with strength while whispering doubt into your own mind. Your words set the tone, not just for how others see you, but for how you see yourself. And self-image drives everything. If your self-image is shaped by fear, your actions will shrink. If it's shaped by strength, your actions will rise. And that image, the one in the mirror, starts and ends with the words you allow in your daily internal dialogue. This isn't about fake affirmations. This isn't about saying things you don't believe. This is about becoming aware of how casual negativity has shaped your identity, and how conscious intention can reverse it. You don't have to wake up shouting affirmations into the sky, but you do have to stop cursing your own name with small sentences that sound harmless but are slowly killing your confidence. Things like, I am terrible with people. I always overthink everything. I'll never be as good as them. These aren't statements, they're declarations, identity codes. Repeated often enough, they become your limits. But you can flip the mirror. You can train your mind to reflect someone new. You can begin to say, I'm learning how to connect more deeply. I'm practicing presence and letting go of overthinking. I'm building my own version of excellence, step by step. These shifts in language are not cosmetic, they're transformational. Because words don't just reflect identity, they build it. Your words are instructions to your subconscious. They tell your nervous system how to prepare. They tell your emotions how to feel. They tell your brain what to expect. So what are you programming? When your inner dialogue reflects anxiety, your body prepares for threat. When it reflects defeat, your energy drops. But when it reflects belief, genuine, even small belief, you feel a shift. Your posture changes, your tone shifts, your decisions start to align with someone who isn't just surviving but leading. And here's the truth. You don't need to feel 100% confident to speak like a leader. You just need to choose language that builds you, not breaks you. Leadership isn't loud. It's intentional. And intentional language shapes identity in silence. You may not see the shift on day one, but say it again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, until one day, your default voice is no longer self-criticism, it's self-guidance. You begin to speak like someone who values their journey, who respects their process, who honors their growth, not out of ego, but out of alignment. Because when your words match who you want to become, your life starts catching up. Suddenly, you're not just surviving the week, you're building something. Suddenly, you're not just reacting to pressure, you're responding with clarity. Suddenly, you're not stuck in the same story, you're editing it with every sentence. You begin to speak in a way that future you would be proud of. You speak with hope, not because it's easy, but because it's required. You speak with clarity, not because you have all the answers, but because you're done entertaining confusion. You speak with dignity, not because the world always gives it, but because you've decided to give it to yourself first. That's the power of choosing the right mirror. You stop reflecting where you've been and start reflecting where you're going. And even if the results aren't visible yet, even if you still feel unsure, your words begin to plant something permanent, because nothing shapes the future faster than the language we use to describe the present. So from this point forward, you choose better words. Not just motivational ones, but accurate ones. Instead of saying, I'm a mess, you say, I'm organizing my chaos. Instead of saying, I can't do this, you say, I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm working on it. Instead of saying, I always get it wrong, you say, I'm learning, adjusting, and getting better every time. These are mirrors worth looking into. Mirrors that reflect not a perfect person, but a progressing one. And progress, repeated daily, creates transformation. So speak like it's real, even if you're scared, even if you're unsure, even if it feels awkward at first, because your words will walk ahead of your belief, clearing the path for identity to follow. You are not the mistakes. You are not the shame. You are not the old reflections. You are the voice that defines what you see moving forward. Make that voice reflect someone you're proud to meet in the mirror. Every single day. Chapter 8. Talk to yourself with the same respect you give to others. You've spent your life being kind to people. You've encouraged friends when they felt low. You've told loved ones they were enough, even when they doubted themselves. You've forgiven others when they failed. You've looked into the eyes of broken people and reminded them of their strength. But when it comes to yourself, you've spoken words you'd never dare say to someone you love. You've whispered insults into your own thoughts. You've called yourself names in silence. You've punished yourself with shame, doubt, and blame in ways you'd never inflict on anyone else. You give others space to be human, but when you make a mistake, you weaponize your voice. That's where the quiet damage begins, not in what the world says about you, but in what you say to yourself when no one's watching. Self-talk is not just about motivation. It's about respect. It's about recognizing that your own mind, your own heart, your own identity deserves the same compassion you extend to others. Think about the people you care about. When they fall, you say, "It's okay." When they're afraid, you say, "You're strong." When they feel small, you say, "I see more in you." Now imagine saying those same things to yourself. Not because it feels natural at first, not because it's easy, but because it's right. Because the same humanity you honor in others lives inside you. When you learn to talk to yourself with that same grace, something shifts. You stop fighting your reflection. You stop dragging your own name through the mud. You stop acting like you're the exception to love and patience. And you begin to treat yourself like someone worth protecting. Respect isn't just how you speak to others. It's how you speak to yourself when you're tired, when you failed, when you're not performing, when no one's around to applaud. Because that's when your words matter most. Anyone can speak kindly to themselves when things are going well. But when the doubt creeps in, when the fear gets loud, when the day doesn't go your way, that's when the mirror reveals the truth. And if you don't like what you hear in that moment, it's not because you're broken. It's because you've been rehearsing disrespect for too long. But that can change. You can start speaking to yourself like someone you value. You can catch the sarcasm, the ridicule, the self-hate. You can pause, breathe, and rewrite the sentence. Instead of "I'm so stupid," you say, "I made a mistake, but I'm still learning." Instead of course I failed again," you say, "That didn't work, but I'm not quitting." Instead of "No one cares about me," you say, "I care about me, and I'm still showing up." These aren't lies. These are acts of self-respect, quiet, consistent, restorative. And the more you practice them, the more they soften the rough edges, the more they reconnect you to yourself. You begin to move differently when your self-talk is rooted in dignity. You carry your head higher. You walk into rooms without shrinking. You make decisions from worth, not from desperation. And most importantly, you start believing that you deserve peace, even if no one else tells you, because you told yourself, and that's enough. Respect is not loud. It's not flashy. It's found in the pause between thoughts, the moment when your old script wants to shame you, and you choose instead to hold yourself with gentleness. Not weakness, gentleness. The kind that says, "I'm not going to abandon myself, even when I'm disappointed." That's real leadership. That's real maturity. That's real healing. Speaking to yourself with respect does not mean you avoid responsibility. It means you hold yourself accountable with kindness, not cruelty. You don't yell your way into growth. You guide yourself with care, with clarity, with firm love, like a leader, like a parent to your own soul. And the more you do it, the more you become someone who is safe within their own mind. That's freedom most people never taste. So give yourself the thing you give so easily to others: grace, patience, space, and above all, respect. Every time you do, you rebuild a part of yourself that the world tried to tear down. And eventually, your inner voice becomes a place of safety, not stress, a place of power, not punishment, a place of growth, not guilt, because you finally decided, "I deserve to be spoken to with the same respect I give to others, and I'll speak that way, no matter who's listening, even when it's just me, especially when it's just me." Chapter 9. What you whisper to yourself becomes the loudest part of you. There are things you say to yourself that no one will ever hear. Not your friends, not your family, not even the people closest to your heart, because those whispers are quiet. They hide in the pause between thoughts. They live in the mirror just before you look away. They echo inside your chest when you're alone. They don't need volume. They don't need attention, because they're already shaping you in silence. That's the part no one tells you. It's not the loud thoughts that define you. It's the whispered ones. The quiet sentences you say in passing. The casual, unconscious lines you've repeated for so long, you no longer notice they're there. I'm always behind. I'll never be enough. No one really sees me. You don't scream these things. You whisper them, but that whisper, repeated enough times, becomes the loudest voice in your soul. Not because it shouts, but because it's constant. It seeps into how you walk, how you answer, how you dress, how you sit in silence. It becomes the lens through which you interpret everything. You don't need a crowd to hear it. You just need repetition. And eventually, those whispers become beliefs. And beliefs become identity. And identity becomes action. So even if you never say it out loud, even if you smile in public, even if you act strong when everyone's watching, that whisper is still there, guiding you, controlling you, limiting you, unless you change it, unless you confront the quiet, unless you take ownership of the voice that lives in your silence. Because here's the truth. That whisper didn't start with you. It was planted by something someone said years ago, by a mistake you made that you never forgave, by a comparison that made you shrink, by a story you believed when you were too young to question it. But now, that whisper has a new storyteller. You, and only you can change it. Because until you do, no compliment will matter. No praise will land. No achievement will feel safe. Because your inner voice will drown it all out. That's why transformation doesn't begin in action. It begins in language, in private, in the mirror. It begins when you catch yourself whispering defeat and choose to whisper hope instead. This isn't about fake positivity. It's about creating truth loud enough to challenge the lie. It's about looking in the mirror and saying something new, not because you believe it yet, but because you're willing to fight for it. You start with one sentence, one reframe, one quiet decision to plant something better. I'm not behind. I'm in process. I don't have to be perfect to be worthy. Even if they don't see me, I still matter. These are the new whispers. And at first, they'll feel awkward, too soft, too unfamiliar. But keep saying them, not with volume, with consistency, because over time, that whisper becomes a rhythm. That rhythm becomes a language. And that language becomes your new default. Suddenly, you're not walking around waiting for someone to fix your thoughts. You're managing your own echo. You're rewriting the sound of your silence. And that's where power lives. Real, quiet, unshakable power. Because anyone can talk big in public, but it takes a leader to speak life in private, to coach their inner voice like it matters, to show up in the mirror and say, I will not let that old whisper guide today. That's not denial, that's decision. That's taking ownership of what lives beneath the surface. Because here's the thing, what you whisper to yourself in moments of fear becomes the courage or the cage you live in. What you whisper in moments of failure becomes either shame or a comeback. What you whisper before the meeting, the test, the performance, determines whether you shrink or rise. Not because the words are magic, but because the words become memory, and memory becomes your internal reality. That's why you have to choose better whispers. Every day, even when no one's watching. Especially when no one's watching. Because that's when the real you is being shaped. So if you've been whispering self-doubt, you don't need to feel guilty. You need to start again. You need to notice the sentence. Catch it. Challenge it. Replace it. Speak like someone who believes in your own resilience, even if you're still hurting. Speak like someone who sees the fight in you, even if today feels heavy. Because the whisper that wins is the one you feed the most. Starve the old one. Don't entertain it. Don't rehearse it. Don't make it comfortable. Feed the one that lifts. The one that speaks of healing, not hurt. Growth, not guilt. Possibility, not punishment. Let that whisper be the one that gets louder. So loud that it becomes the soundtrack of your silence. The root of your choices. The rhythm of your walk. And when the world gets quiet, and you're left with only your own thoughts, you'll realize, I am no longer the voice of my pain. I am the voice of my process. I am the whisper that carries power, and I will speak like someone I'm proud of, even in silence. Chapter 10. Your inner voice is the first leader you ever meet. Before any teacher ever taught you, before any boss ever led you, before any mentor gave you advice, there was one voice already present. Yours. Not the one you used to speak out loud, the one that lived in your head, quietly guiding you, long before anyone else ever tried to shape your path. That voice is your first leader, not your parents, and not your school, not your manager, you. That internal voice is the first system of leadership you'll ever know. And here's the hard truth. If that voice is broken, no external leader can fix you. If that voice is passive, no motivator can move you. If that voice is abusive, no applause will heal you. Because leadership doesn't begin when someone tells you what to do. It begins when you believe you are worth being led by yourself. And for most people, that belief is hard-earned. Because your inner voice wasn't born toxic. It was shaped by fear, by failure, by criticism, by unmet expectations. You heard things that made you question yourself. You saw things that made you feel small. You experienced moments that convinced you, maybe I'm not enough. Maybe I should stay quiet. Maybe I can't trust myself. And that's when the leadership within you began to fracture. But here's the breakthrough. You can rebuild it. You can become the kind of leader your inner world needs. Not by shouting, not by forcing, but by listening to what your voice has been trying to say and choosing to respond with something healthier. Because your inner voice is not just a commentary, it's a compass. It shapes how you think. It informs how you act. It determines how far you believe you can go. If that compass is off, your direction will always feel confusing. But if that compass is aligned, if that voice is grounded in truth, if that internal leadership becomes steady and strong, then no matter what happens outside you, chaos, doubt, criticism, rejection, you still move with clarity, not because life is easy, but because your leadership is rooted, and that root starts with self-respect. You begin treating your own thoughts with care. You hold your own feelings with understanding. You coach yourself like you would someone you deeply believe in. You don't rush to judgment. You don't feed panic. You don't push yourself with shame. You lead, even when your emotions are heavy, even when your confidence is shaken, even when everything feels uncertain. Because real leadership isn't about pretending you're not struggling. It's about guiding yourself through the struggle with patience and presence. You pause when needed. You speak truth over the lies. You redirect your thoughts when they start spiraling. That's leadership. And it begins with choosing what kind of voice will live inside you. Because you don't just hear your inner voice, you become it. If that voice is scared, you'll hesitate. If that voice is angry, you'll react. If that voice is insecure, you'll shrink. But if that voice is calm, if that voice is courageous, if that voice is kind, then you will carry yourself differently. You will lead yourself like someone worth following. And when you do that, something powerful happens. You become trustworthy to yourself.
You no longer need constant reassurance.
You no longer depend on perfect circumstances, because you've built something inside that cannot be shaken by what's outside. And once that happens, everything changes. You handle stress better. You recover faster from failure. You stay grounded in storms. You don't avoid fear, you walk through it. Because your leader, your inner voice, is no longer your enemy. It's your guide, your coach, your calm in the middle of chaos. And you don't have to wait years for this to happen. You can start today with one decision. I will no longer speak to myself like a stranger. I will no longer lead myself with force or fear. I will become the kind of leader I wish I had growing up. You don't need a title. You don't need followers. You don't need applause. You just need a voice that honors the truth. A voice that is firm but not cruel. A voice that says, I've got you, even when things get hard. Because that's the first leader. And until that leader becomes strong, no amount of success will feel stable. But once that leader is built, you can walk into any room and carry peace. You can face any challenge and still feel centered. You can rise again and again without waiting for permission. Because the voice in your head became the voice of a leader, and that changes everything. Chapter 11. Stop being loyal to the voice that hurts you. There's a voice inside you that doesn't love you. It sounds familiar. It sounds like your own. It's been with you for years, so long, you've stopped questioning its presence. But it doesn't serve you. It doesn't build you. It doesn't lift you. It hurts you. And the worst part is, you keep listening to it. Not because you want to, but because you've been loyal to it. You've mistaken familiarity for truth. You've allowed repetition to become reality. You've given that voice a throne inside your head, and now it commands your confidence, your peace, your belief in yourself. That voice says you're not good enough, and you agree. It says you'll always mess it up, and you nod. It says no one really cares about you, and you carry that lie like a weight on your chest. That voice is not a friend. It's not a teacher. It's not your conscience. It is a wound with a mouth. And as long as you keep treating it like a mentor, it will keep ruining your momentum. But here's what no one tells you. You don't owe that voice loyalty. Not one more day. Just because it's been with you doesn't mean it gets to lead you. Just because you've believed it doesn't mean it's true. Just because it helped you survive doesn't mean it should shape how you live. Because that's what happens sometimes. That voice was created during survival. Maybe it kept you small so others wouldn't hurt you. Maybe it kept you quiet so you wouldn't be rejected. Maybe it kept you doubtful so you wouldn't risk failing. But you're not surviving anymore. You're building now. You're growing. You're becoming. And that voice? It's outdated. It's broken code, still trying to run in a new system. And if you don't confront it, if you don't challenge it, it will quietly sabotage everything you're trying to build, because it speaks with authority it does not deserve. And the only reason it still has power is because you keep showing up to serve it. Like a soldier to the wrong commander. It says stay small, you obey. It says don't try, you retreat. It says you're a fraud, you shrink. But what if you stopped listening? What if you revoked that loyalty? What if you said, no more? No more building my future around old pain. No more letting fear be the voice of reason. No more worshipping doubt as if it's wisdom. Because that's what this really is. It's not just negative thinking. It's misdirected loyalty. You've been faithful to the wrong leader, and now it's time to take back your allegiance. To shift your loyalty to the voice that wants you to heal. The one that says, you've made it this far. Keep going. The one that says, you are not your failures, you're what rises from them. The one that says, I see your weakness, and I still choose you. That voice is in there. Maybe it's faint. Maybe it hasn't spoken in years, but it's waiting. And the moment you decide to stop honoring the voice that hurts you, the moment you stop defending it, the moment you stop saying, but maybe it's right, that's the moment something shifts. That's when healing becomes leadership. That's when power replaces shame. That's when your story begins to change. Because you realize, I've spent years protecting the part of me that never protected me. I've defended the voice that destroyed me. But not anymore. I'm choosing a new loyalty. Not to comfort. Not to fear. Not to the lies I've rehearsed. But to the future I'm building. To the person I'm becoming. To the truth that frees me. And that truth is this. You deserve to be led by love. Not by guilt. Not by perfectionism. Not by pressure. By love. By belief. By hope. The old voice may still whisper, but it no longer commands your obedience, because you've seen it for what it is, a shadow of your past, pretending to be your future. And now, you're done bowing to it. You've grown too strong to keep calling that voice home. So you rise. You speak back. You replace every insult with intention. You walk into every moment with a new loyalty to the voice that builds, the voice that restores, the voice that finally loves you. Chapter 12. The way you speak to yourself teaches others how to treat you. Before anyone ever disrespected you, before anyone ever dismissed your worth, before anyone ever talked down to you, you did it first. Maybe not out loud, maybe not with intent, but somewhere, silently, you made it okay to be treated less than you deserve. And it started with how you spoke to yourself. Every time you called yourself stupid after a mistake, every time you laughed off your dream before someone else could reject it, every time you looked in the mirror and criticized what you saw, you were teaching the world, training people, subtly saying, "This is how I talk to me, so you can too." And they followed your example. Because people don't just observe your actions, they absorb your energy. They watch what you allow. They feel what you believe. And if you constantly diminish yourself, others will too. Not because they're cruel, but because you set the tone. You wrote the manual. And the saddest part, you probably didn't even realize it. Because self-talk feels private. It feels harmless, but it is the blueprint for every boundary you carry. If your internal voice is weak, your external boundaries will collapse. If your internal voice is shaming, your relationships will mirror that tone. If your internal voice lacks compassion, your world will feel like a constant critique. That's the ripple effect. That's the silent influence of your inner language. And until you change it, until you speak to yourself like someone worthy of kindness, you'll keep attracting people who reinforce the pain. Not because you want to suffer, but because suffering is what's familiar, and we gravitate toward what feels like home, even when that home is broken. But what if you changed the address? What if you built a new home inside? What if your voice became safe, not sharp? What if your thoughts became soft, not violent? What if your mind became a place of guidance, not punishment? People would notice. Your energy would shift. Your posture would change. You'd stop shrinking to fit. You'd stop apologizing for being. You'd stop waiting for someone else to validate what you already know. That you matter. That your words have weight. That your tone creates tides. And suddenly, you'd start setting new standards. Not out of anger, out of clarity. You'd speak from a place that no longer begs to be seen, but assumes it deserves to be. You'd correct disrespect, not because you need to prove anything, but because you no longer tolerate what you don't practice with yourself. You'd let people go, not out of spite, but out of alignment. Because you'd realize, if you can't match the way I treat myself, we're not walking together. That's not arrogance. That's emotional maturity. That's self-respect with a voice. And it's built one word at a time. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "I'm so dumb," stop. The next time you joke about how no one wants you, don't. The next time you soften your voice to seem less intimidating, pause. Because those are not random moments. They're micro-permissions. They tell the world what you're willing to accept. And if you want people to treat you with reverence, you have to start revering yourself. That means speaking with care, even when you're alone. Especially when you're alone. Because the way you treat your silence becomes the script others follow. So speak with grace, with strength, with clarity. Say, "I made a mistake," not "I am a mistake." Say, "I'm growing," not "I'm always behind." To say, "This is a hard season," not "I'm a failure." Because those small shifts become tectonic over time, and they build a foundation, a new home, where your voice becomes your ally, where your thoughts become allies to your purpose, not enemies to your peace. And when people encounter that version of you, they'll either rise to meet your standard or fall away. Both are gifts. Because when you treat yourself like someone of value, you don't cling to those who don't. You don't chase crumbs when you've built a feast inside. You don't beg for seats at tables where your presence isn't honored. You create your own table, with chairs for those who speak like you do. Softly, strongly, sacredly. Because you finally understand. Every word you say to yourself is a lesson others are learning from, even when they're not listening. So let the lesson be this: I am not available for disrespect. I don't use my voice to harm myself. My language reflects my worth, and the world will respond. Not instantly, not perfectly, but eventually with the same respect you modeled, because leadership starts in silence. Honor begins in thought, and love, it starts with the way you talk to the one person you can never leave. You. Chapter 13. Confidence isn't loud, it's consistent. Confidence doesn't always roar. It doesn't always walk into a room demanding attention. It doesn't always come with applause, compliments, or a spotlight. Real confidence. It whispers. It moves silently. It shows up when no one else is watching. It's not built in grand moments. It's built in the small, private repetition. The ones where you choose to believe in yourself again and again and again. That's what most people miss. They think confidence is a performance, that it comes from what people say about you, that it lives in external validation. But it doesn't. Confidence is created in moments when you follow through with your own word. When you say, "I'll show up," and you do. When you say, "I'll try again," and you do. When you say, "I've got this," even when your hands are shaking. That's not arrogance. That's trust. Trust in your process. Trust in your journey. Trust in your growth. And trust, just like any relationship, is built through consistency. Not perfection, not noise, just consistency. You don't have to scream to prove you're strong. You just have to keep going when it's hard. You don't have to impress anyone to be valid. You just have to stay committed when it's quiet. Because the most dangerous confidence is not the loudest. It's the most stable. It's the kind that doesn't flinch when it's challenged. The kind that doesn't crumble when it's criticized. The kind that doesn't need a crowd to feel complete. But that kind of confidence, it doesn't happen overnight. It's forged in discipline, formed in routine, built in the moments where you don't feel like it, but you show up anyway. And here's the powerful truth. The more consistently you show up for yourself, the quieter your doubt becomes. Not because the doubt disappears, but because your trust gets louder. You stop needing to prove anything. You stop needing to chase applause. You stop explaining your worth to people who aren't even listening, because you already know. You know what you've been through. You know how many times you've had to rebuild. You know how many times you've felt afraid and did it anyway. And that knowledge, that's where true confidence lives. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It simply exists, like gravity. Reliable, predictable, unshakable. People may not see your strength right away, but they'll feel it. They'll sense it in your peace. They'll notice it in how you walk away from things that don't honor you. They'll watch how you speak with clarity instead of volume. Because confidence isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the calmest, the most rooted, the most grounded. But here's what no one tells you. That kind of confidence isn't gifted, it's earned. One small decision at a time. You wake up and drink water when your body's tired. You do the work even when no one will see it. You speak truth to yourself instead of feeding the lies. You hold your head high, not because you feel perfect, but because you've made peace with being in process. And that's what people admire most. Not your results, your rhythm, not your victories, your vision. Because people don't follow loud leaders, they follow steady ones. And you can be that. But it starts with how you show up for yourself. Not once, not when it's convenient, but consistently. That's where your power lives. Not in the peaks, but in the pattern. Not in the applause, but in the alignment. Not in the shouting, but in the showing up. Again and again, with quiet determination. Because the confidence you seek is already inside you. It's just waiting for proof. And the proof isn't in how loud you speak. It's in how faithfully you walk. So keep walking, even when it's dark, even when it's lonely, even when it's slow. Your consistency is building a voice inside you that cannot be shaken. And that voice will become your confidence. Calm, certain, clear. Chapter 14. Replace judgment with curiosity. That's how growth begins. You can't grow in a space where you're constantly being judged, and that includes the space inside your own mind. Most people don't even realize how often they judge themselves. They wake up and the criticism starts immediately. You slept too late again. You're falling behind. You're not doing enough. You're so lazy. That voice, that relentless voice, it isn't curious. It doesn't ask questions. It only makes declarations. Those declarations, over time, become identity. You begin to think you are what that voice says you are, not because it's true, but because it's repeated. And repetition, unchecked, becomes belief. So you start walking around not as someone evolving, but as someone condemned, stuck in the courtroom of your own mind, with no defense. And the judge, it's you. But here's what you were never told. You don't need to be a judge, you need to be a student. You don't need to punish yourself, you need to understand yourself. Because judgment is final, but curiosity is open. Judgment says, you failed. Curiosity asks, why did that happen? Judgment says, you're weak. Curiosity wonders, what's making you feel drained lately? Judgment says, you're not enough. Curiosity leans in. What belief told you that? And is it even true? See the difference. Judgment builds walls. Curiosity builds bridges. Judgment keeps you stuck. Curiosity gets you moving. And here's where the shift really begins. Start treating every mistake not as a confirmation of your inadequacy, but as a window into your humanity. Because the truth is, you're not broken, you're learning. You're not late, you're growing. You're not weak. You're discovering strength in places you never had to look before. That's not denial, that's depth. That's what happens when you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what can I learn from this? It's a small change in language, but it leads to a massive change in life. Because your mind stops being a battlefield and starts becoming a classroom, where every moment, good or bad, is a teacher, where your flaws aren't disqualifications, but invitations to deeper self-knowledge. You begin to realize you don't need more shame. You need more insight, not more labels, more understanding. You stop saying I'm terrible with discipline. You start saying discipline is hard for me right now. What's draining my willpower? You stop saying I always screw things up. You start saying what pattern is repeating and how can I gently disrupt it? Because that's what curiosity does. It opens a door. Judgment slams it shut. So here's your work. Every time you catch yourself judging, pause and replace the sentence with a question. Instead of why am I like this, say where did this come from? Instead of I'm so behind, say what does progress look like for me right now? Instead of I'm not as good as them, say what is my definition of enough? That's self-leadership. That's healing. That's choosing to walk into the fire of your flaws, not to burn but to emerge forged. And make no mistake, it is a choice. No one's going to flip that switch for you. You have to decide, I will no longer judge myself for struggling. I will no longer label myself by my worst moments. I will no longer fear my reflection. I will study it, because that's how growth begins, not in the glow of success, but in the gritty middle, where you sit with your shadows and say, I see you. I'm not afraid of you, and I will learn from you. That's how you evolve. That's how you rise. Not by running from the hard parts of you, but by listening to them, learning from them, loving them enough to lead them somewhere new. So the next time that old voice starts to criticize, don't argue with it. Don't fight it. Just outgrow it. Respond with curiosity. Respond with softness. Respond with vision. Because when you do, your whole life changes. Not instantly, but inevitably. Because now you're building from truth, not trauma. From awareness, not assumption. From intention, not impulse. And that is the soil where the strongest version of you will grow. Chapter 15. You are the voice you've been waiting to hear. All your life, you've been waiting. waiting for someone to come save you, waiting for someone to see your worth, waiting for someone to speak life into your dry seasons, waiting for the right moment, the right mentor, the right miracle. But here's what the journey was always trying to teach you. You are the voice you've been waiting to hear, not because you're perfect, but because you're present, not because you have all the answers, but because you're finally willing to stop abandoning yourself when it matters most. The truth is, no one knows what you've walked through like you do. No one felt those silent heartbreaks. No one heard those internal battles. No one stood beside you in those invisible wars. You did. You were there when it fell apart. You were there when no one showed up. You were there when it hurt too much to speak, but you kept breathing. So don't discount your voice now. Don't silence it with doubt. Don't mute it with comparison. Don't wait for a louder, more polished version of yourself to rise. The version you are right now is already more powerful than you realize. Because you're awake. You're aware. You're no longer just surviving. You're rebuilding. And you don't rebuild with noise. You rebuild with presence, with language, with how you speak to yourself when no one is listening. Because that voice, that internal narrator, it sets the tone for your entire life. And now you've learned, you can change the script. You can be the one who says, I believe in me. I am allowed to take up space. I don't have to earn rest or love or safety. It's my birthright. I will not abandon myself just to belong to others. I am not broken. I'm becoming. Let that voice rise, not as a shout, but as a steady heartbeat, a rhythm that keeps you grounded when the storms come, a presence that reminds you, you are already home. This chapter of your life is not about proving anything to anyone. It's about returning to the center, to the soul, to the still, unshakable truth that's been whispering under all the chaos. You are enough. You always were. You just forgot how to speak to yourself like someone sacred, but not anymore. Now you lead yourself with grace. Now you speak truth instead of shame. Now you choose softness without losing strength. Now you speak to your wounds, not with judgment, but with honor. And the world will begin to respond. Because the way you talk to yourself echoes louder than any resume, any outfit, any performance. It's magnetic. It either attracts people who respect your worth or repels those who never did. Either way, you win. Because you're no longer negotiating your value, you're declaring it with every step, every word, every time you choose presence over panic, compassion over critique, truth over trauma. You become the voice that carries you forward. So don't wait anymore. Don't wait for the book, or the coach, or the perfect moment. You are the moment. You are the shift. You are the guide you've been craving. And your voice, it matters, not because it's flawless, but because it's finally yours. So speak. Speak to your future self with faith. Speak to your past self with forgiveness. Speak to your present self with gentleness. Let your language become legacy. Let your inner dialogue become a revolution, one that begins with this truth. You are not the echo of other people's opinions. You are not the replay of old failures. You are not a broken story waiting for rescue. You are the narrator now. You hold the pen. You direct the tone. You choose the words. And that choice, it changes everything.